You're looking at a early 90s John Deere 7240 815 planter. 8 rows for corn, 15 rows for beans. It's an interplant planter. This will be a video series showing our build, or we should say rebuild, of this planter. Ultimately, we bought this planter for nothing more than the toolbar, as it was cheaper to buy a used wore-out planter with a good toolbar than it would be to buy the toolbar, which the only way you can get it now is via parts, which would have been in the excess of $20,000. Alrighty, here's the toolbar. This is stripped off and ready for rebuild. We power washed it before the weather turned cold. We will be sliding this in our shop next for reconstruction. This toolbar, again, is a 7240 John Deere. The 7240 was the first one. This would have came out with a 7200 planter. So if you'd have 7200 like a 6-row, you'd have a 7240 split row. Then this was replaced by the 1780, not to be confused with the front fold series. This would have been the smaller John Deere 1780 version, even though the Friesen bar version was the bigger version. If you do follow the Friesen bar front fold 1780s, there's some confusion there as well, because that toolbar by Friesen was actually used on 3 planters at that late 90s time era. Case IH used the same bar with their row units, White used the same bar with their row units, and then John Deere used the same bar with their row units. But nothing to do with this series. So 7240 is the first one, 1780 is the second one, and 1785 was the final version. Again, all made by John Deere on this toolbar and row units. But the row units would be, this would be like 7200 vintage, 1780 would be the XP vintage, and then the 5 series row unit would be in the 1785s. Anything that ends in a 5 would be the new 5 series row unit. So 1785 ends in a 5, 1795 ends in a 5, 1775 ends in a 5 series row unit. Now, it doesn't matter because this toolbar never changed. They just changed the rest of the planter that went on there. So what they did change was they changed some of the vacuum motors, and they made a few updates to the markers, which will be getting bolted onto this toolbar. And what we bought this for was just the toolbar. Now we have a chain hanging here. This chain is to just support the markers temporarily. That'll get us into the shop. We have the markers off for repacking, and we have pretty much all the hoses off. This was initially tied into the lift circuit of this planter, meaning that the carrying wheels here, the big rocker shaft carrying wheels, once those went down, the markers went out. This is your marker sequencing valve. This bracket here is where the vacuum motor bolts on. So yeah, we're getting ready to take this in and hack it up, and then we will start to reconstruct it into a new changed design. And we're going to be adding ExactEmerge row units to this, as well as central commodity systems. Central commodity systems will be coming from these. We have 2 of these. Bought them used, had a very difficult time finding them, but we did. This is called a Refuge Plus, and if you were back in the 1790 era, that's when the government came in and said you had to plant so much refuge. So they came out with what they called the Refuge Plus, which was a 3rd tank. And there's a little dish in these tanks right here. That little dish actually fits up around the other 2 tanks. So it sits on the front side of like a 1790 or 1795 hitch. Factory installed device, had quick connects. There you can see one on the hose. So you threw in your refuge corn that was required by law to plant. And wherever you wanted to plant that refuge corn out in the field, you just got out, you clicked those, hooked them on to the other big tanks, and vice versa. Then you could just pull corn out of here, and you could plant up to 8 runs of, because it's 8 tubes, so up to 8 rows of refuge corn. And again, that's up to, because you didn't have to plant 8, you could cap a few of those off or whatever you want to use out of the manifold. It was up to an 8-run manifold. Anyway, the Refuge Plus system is no longer sold because it's got refuge in a bag, modern day hybrids. But what they do they do still sell this because it's used on the 1745. The 1745 planter is the new John Deere 815. They had worked with Bauer and were thinking about coming out like a DB20, and there are a few of those out there. This system here is not called Refuge Plus, but the tank and the frame are a similar frame, and the hopper and manifolding is all used on the new 1745 John Deere planter. So it's not like you can't get parts for it, and it's not like you can't even obtain the tanks or anything through parts. So it is still available. We got these for an absolute fraction of the cost compared to buying it through the parts department. So we were lucky in our find. Again, you can still service it and get parts for it, and you can even order through the parts department. Now, they did discontinue the 1785, but you can order the frame and everything through the parts department, but it would have been about 3 times the price of what we just paid for an actual older planter, and we just went ahead and just used it for the toolbar and took the row units immediately, threw them away. Here we have a lot of boxes with a lot of parts in them. These are all parts to the ExactEmerge kit, and here you're going to see computers and wiring harnesses. And as you go around, you're going to see row units. There's your alternator for your tractor mount. Of course, we have our removed seed tubes from the toolbar, or vacuum tubes, my correction, from the toolbar. And here would be your new row units. These are an ExactEmerge row units available from John Deere as a complete unit. Hydraulic down pressure miniature hoppers, and they do sell a 3-bushel hopper for these. The 3-bushel hopper, all you do is remove this lid. The box actually sits above it and just lines up with this, so the box actually pours into the mini hopper. We're not going to be using the boxes because we're going to be using it as a CCS. And I did kind of screw up and ordered these less closers, but we were able to go and get those ordered later, and I ordered it less tillage because we did not know what we were going to use at the time, but we have that problem taken care of as well. But we did order them complete and new, and these are a bolt-on unit complete with Saxy U-bolts. So once we configure our toolbar, we will be ready to go for reinstall with whole new units. And what makes it easy, you don't have to have shafts and everything lined up. It's literally a wiring harness, click and click, here and here, 2 plugs, and that's it. If you chose to run the air pneumatic closers, you would use these. That line just sits in there, they're factory installed. We will take that line out as we do not have them and have no intentions of using the pneumatic closers. I actually prefer the manual over the pneumatics. All right, we got things moved over to the shop here. We have the heat on, nice and warm in here, good working conditions. And we have the planter sitting on a set of caster rollers so we can move it around and work on it. What we've done, we've mocked up the height in accordance to the rollers underneath so we can simulate drawbar height, balance our toolbar, and we're starting to mock up where the refuge tanks will sit. We also got the markers here exchanged out. Shoop on these, which was half the price of John Deere, as well as many other things purchased through Shoop. So you can see we're mocking up the CCS here, and there's the second unit there on the floor. And we won't be able to weld these up until we get some more parts in, but kind of gives you an idea of what it looks like. And we got 3 steps here, so there will be a platform in this area, handrail on the back, and we're going to access from the front, and we'll use our John Deere steps, trying to keep everything looking as John Deere as possible. And they will come up this direction here, and we'll be able to access from the front. That will allow the units in the rear to be free and open and not covered by a railing or plugged up. I just don't want to I don't want to have anything more back here than what we already have, just for ease of access. Got our cylinders repacked, new motor for our vacuum. Take this off, sand it down, we'll paint it. And like I say, we're working on getting this mocked up, but I'm not going to weld any brackets on or anything until we get a little closer in the project here. But this is kind of gives you an idea what it's going to look like. Be another tank over here on this side of the hitch, and we'll have the units attached to the toolbar here, and you can see where all the U-bolts were, and obviously you saw the pictures in the beginning of the video of the original units. The others will go on there, they just won't have boxes. These are your seed boxes now. As the parts we ordered come in, we will continue to assemble this planter and continue the video series at that point. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for continuation.